your nature will become elucidated. In the very beginning of the Great Learning, you say to enlighten your enlightening virtue. And that enlightening, that virtue is internal, from the mentioned point of view. And how you allow your basic nature to reveal itself. You allow it when your heart and mind becomes tranquil. And that basic nature, many people say, human beings are good, is basically potential. I don't think it's potential. I use the term authentic possibility. In what sense? In our daily life, that nature reveals itself all the time. But unfortunately for us, because we're not cultivated well enough, and it reveals itself in such a sporadic way. In most cases, they don't reveal the best quality of what we ought to be, but we experience it. When you feel really compassionate, when you feel really friendly, really human. It happens all the time, but not in a sustainable way. That's why Confucius said Yang Hui, his best disciple, is able to do that for 3 months. Most of the students would be able to do it for a week or longer. You try to do it yourself. Think about it, and whether you be able to do it for a whole month, then you're better than most of Confucius' disciples. If you can do it for 3 months, you're better than Yang Hui. If you do it for the whole year, you're better than Confucius. So this is something very common, but something extremely difficult to do. I'll just give you one example. This is not Confucian, this is Zhang. If you try to be quiet for 1 minute, that 1 minute, your mind never wanders. Just focus on 1 minute, and after that minute, you realize total concentration, either on a point or on anything. Normally, after 10 seconds, you begin to think about something. Your mind wanders. You try to do it for 1 minute, and it's not easy at all. I think maybe you can all do that, and you're much better seasoned in this particular training. Related to this idea of the tranquility of the heart and mind, which provide a condition for the revealing of the principle in our nature. He again talks about another important question. Very difficult. We have to study and analyze it a little bit more. He thinks the heart and mind, that's the Xin, is related to nature. Human nature is our principle, because it defines who we are, and also human feelings. This is something that the classical Confucianists didn't pay too much attention to, human feelings. And so, what is the relationship between the heart and mind and the principle, which is the idea of the human heart and mind, and the inherent principle that defines who we are? And what is the relationship between this heart and mind and human feelings? In the West, as you know, not in the West, in most of philosophical inquiries, the question is the body and mind question. But for the Neo-Confucian question, it's a question of the mind and heart and human nature. That's the reason the Confucian scholars very much focused on this particular question. So I would say the heart and mind reveals, in an authentic way, reveals our nature. It mentions, there's a lot of discussion of this question. And the heart and mind regulates or controls our feelings. And so the heart and mind relates to these two differently, and yet they're integrated. So one discipline of the heart and mind is to say how your emotions can be regularized. A question of balance. Of course, beyond balance, the question of harmony. You need to respect all your feelings, including when you become angry. But you need to ask the question, why you're angry? Is your anger an expression of some kind of deep-rooted frustration? Or your anger is a response to a situation that deserves your being angry? In other words, we see something immoral, we become indignant. This anger is basically justified. You become angry at some person, I realize, not that person has done anything because I, failed to turn in the paper. I became very unhappy with myself in the last few days. Then that's not right. So how to harmonize these relationships? Any questions? We may have 2 or 3 minutes, maybe just one. Yes, please.
What's the difference between the heart and the feelings?
From Zhuxi's point of view, feelings are expressions of the heart.
Okay.
Feelings, anger, joy, all these things are somewhat related to the heart. Right now, we probably say related to the brain. I'm not sure. The idea is that the heart is always in a dynamic process. So the 7 emotions are all expressions of the heart. Yes.
How much does he talk about math, and why isn't it more important since it's the most disinterested discipline?
No, virtually nothing. But I think the important thing is he was very, very much interested in science, because one of the great scientists of the time was Shen Guo. He studied, this is related to perhaps the most important principle in Zhuxi is investigation of things. You have to investigate things. If you say you have to investigate things, this is the way to get into a kind of scientific domain. In the West, there are 2 important traditions for the scientific domain. One is Greek mathematical thinking, geometry. The second one is Bacon's experimental science. If you combine the 2, that's modern science. And Zhuxi is actually very, very significant in that period of time. We're talking about 12th, 13th century. He was very deeply involved in empirical science, investigation of things. Sometimes made observation. If there are shells on top of the mountain, they say, well, if we deduce that this mountain originally was an ocean, that was the ocean transformed geologically. So he made a lot of very interesting observations. That's one of the reasons one of his followers, later we're talking about Weiming, believed that you have to investigate the bamboos in order to understand the principle in you. And he spent 7 days trying to investigate, probably didn't know the proper method, and he fell sick. He was not able to do it. But investigation of things, which is scientifically significant. And later, not Zhuxi's time, later, Chinese became extremely interested